The National Collaborative for Health Equity invites you to listen to a conversation about arts and culture.
I am April Fitzpatrick, an interdisciplinary artist, art therapist, and licensed mental health counselor. And I'm the founder of Pineapples with Purpose, a mobile arts and health initiative bringing art and health to communities that have been historically impacted by racial trauma.
I am Mahoganee Amiger. I am also an interdisciplinary artist with music as my first love, as a singer and a songwriter. And I am also the co founder of a nonprofit called Responsible Artistry, where we use music and the arts to work with our children and help them to become better adults. And I'm also the CEO of the Mahogany Experience, where I take all of my artistry when I'm on stage and I use it as a way of connecting.
Mahogany, it's great to be in conversation with you today as we talk about the role of arts and culture and its impact on healing justice and advancing health equity. I thought we'd start off with some storytelling because that is very who we are. We tell stories. And so, if you would like to kind of share a story that has been impactful to you and how art has been impactful to your community, and how you measured it and how you track the impact and any other details that may be beneficial for us to learn more about and understand your work.
So we had the opportunity to do a 16-week artist residency with one of our local middle schools. And throughout the project, so students were able to write their own lyrics. They did all of the process of recording the song, and the program used music to really cultivate confidence in them. And by the end of the project, so 4 months, picture that, 4 months with students, 16 weeks. And we had a teacher come up to us and share that. Well, first she asked us, "What did you do to my students?" These were some students that did not talk in class at all. They were just very quiet, not very interactive in class. And she said, now they are literally social butterflies. She said, I really want to know. Like, she was serious. I want to know what you did. And to be able to use music and the art to get that kind of feedback. And another teacher told us that their reading levels actually went up 10% by the time we were done with the 4 weeks. And so it let us know that the work was not just about the art. It was also helping the students in their classroom. And another thing that this 16-week residency did was it transitioned outside of the classroom with the 25 students that we were working with. So now the students in the hallway started connecting and interacting with us. They would come into the classroom and, want to be a part of it. And so literally by the end, because we started in January, ended at the end of the year. So you're talking about a whole school affected by a 25 student project, right? But we were able to build relationships outside of the students that we were actually working with in the program, and also the teachers and the administrators. We built relationships with them as well. So it was a great pilot project, I would say. Um, to be able to do the goal is to be there the entire school year.
Mhm.
Because if we could do that at 4 months, imagine what we could do for an entire school year.
And mahogany, that's very powerful, right? I think I want to amplify and re-emphasize that you took 25 students and impacted an entire school, right? And some of the things that you described there are reduced avoidance, right? Reduced withdrawal, increase emotional literacy, so reduce internalized stress of maybe that was causing self-silencing
Mhm.
amongst these students. You created a space for their voice to be uplifted and shared without judgment and instead curiosity. And then you move into narrative change, right? of changing the narrative of taking those 25 students and their stories once they start talking to their teachers and other students who may have had hesitancies or resistance or even judgment about what was happening. You help shift that narrative around that, and then you just talk about self-efficacy in general, of now feeling confident about something that you have produced, that you
Yeah,
have witnessed, nothing that no one has told you, that you've actually produced yourself. This came from you. And so this is your own proof, living proof of the power that you can have when you engage with creativity and music and art in that way, to externalize that. I think that's very powerful. And it's those stories that help us back the need of art as a science and this need for um, this to be in our community.
absolutely.
Very similar to some of the work that I've done with my initiative, Wellness on Wheels, where we partnered with the Mary Sue Richardson Community Center in Ocala, Florida. And what was very unique about this is that this community had been at the center of some racialized trauma with the oil company that had been polluting the areas of a majority Black neighborhood, and some health conditions had come up as a result of that. And two Black women advocated through policy, educational awareness to have this oil infrastructure removed, essentially. And it was. And in a response, they put a community center at that site. So there was a symbolic change of showing what advocacy and awareness can look like when it comes to using art to make social change. And so in that, I brought arts and wellness and pineapples with purpose inside of this community center, where there was an exhibition that stood for about 6 months, and programming that happened. And what I also witnessed during this time was people from all walks of life had never really even seen something like this happen in their neighborhood, and they never had an opportunity to voice and truth tell about how these factors were impacting them. And so we took them through a cradle core crown session to unearth those stories, to use creative practice to transform into positive production, and then to transform their own story and voice, and what happens for them after they leave this session. So there was art making, interactive engagement, and art therapy was at the center of that. And similar to your stories, what we saw was evidence of that product analysis, the way your students wrote song. We saw individuals create art. And then there was some verbal reflection where, like you said, we saw individuals go from very silent to kind of storytelling to now laughing and then talking amongst one another. We also observed some physiological and behavior indicators, which mean you also have been briefly sharing about the somatic experience. We saw the less tension in the body. We saw people kind of breathing kind of slow down. We saw individuals from being still in their seats start to walk up and move, move around. And that's that oxytocin connection between what
Yeah,
happens when we are gathered together in community. And so it sounds like we both were using these overarching assessing processes of looking at the engagement level with one another, the actual product production, the process of the art making and music writing, and we got some wonderful outcomes.
yeah, absolutely. And I will also add, this was right after going through the pandemic. So you're
Mm,
talking about it was really chaos is what it felt like coming back to school after, going through the pandemic and not being with your friends and everybody. And so we were dealing with that not just from the students that were in our program, but really just the students throughout the entire school. And it's like once the word
mm.
spread that, these two artists were in the school, it's like now we started having conversation with kids out in the hallway and who were not even in
Mhm.
the classroom with us. And, they started kind of
Oh wow.
coming into the class and wanting to interact because music is always going to be an amazing
What
bridge.
you're describing there is that narrative change,
Yes.
that narrative change and that increased trust, that relational repair, that social engagement that happens in one place, but it's a domino effect outside these other branches of that tree that you're creating with the art process.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know I love trees.
So let's jump into the conditions that essentially motivated and sparked us as artists, as healers, as health practitioners in our own personal life, that transform into our professional practice to even bring about the awareness of why we felt like this needed to be a thing. I know me and you are both on the southeast, me being from Mississippi, you being from South Carolina, and there's a lot of data and statistics and narrative that we share. But I want to bring those to a common point of the Mississippi River and just like the stories and the history and our adjacency to that and how that informs some of the conditions that made us aware of why art is so necessary for our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And being an I am a Gullah Geechee woman, and also living on the coast, right on the water. And water is such an essential part of our story. And a lot of times we will begin the story with the Ma'afa, right? The transatlantic enslavement trade. But water has always been a and not just to us, really to the world. We all need
Hmm.
water to sustain ourselves and for our planet to just exist. We need water. And as an artist, I began to really just look at history and culture, and water just seeped into my music. And it is a spiritual thing that we go through. It's an emotional thing that we go through. And then we have to get to the data, like how
Hmm.
water is poisoned in our communities, black land being taken, and it it makes you feel a responsibility to
Hmm.
not just create, something good, something people can laugh to, but for me personally, it began to be a thing where it was healing me. So then I knew that it could heal other people, and not just in our community because the music has the ability to go outside of you, right? Out into the world. And so when other people are telling you that they listen to your music when they just need to relax, when they're gardening, when they are getting off work, it's something that helps them to um, kind of balance themselves at the end of the day or even at the beginning of the day. So it lets you know that your purpose led work
Hmm.
is bigger than you.
The Mississippi River and water was such a beautiful analogy because it holds these dual truths. One of the essential of needing water, even in our body, right? The fluidity that we need to
Mm,
digest and move through the water as occurring within land and agriculture, food access and things like that. It's so essential as one of the elements. But then there's this dual perspective of water's association and the memory that it holds of, like you said, environmental toxicity, even components of slavery, pollution, and disinvestment. And so that's an interesting dynamic to interesting current to be in the middle of, right?
yeah,
And so also thinking about our material choice, there's fluidity and a water-based element of music, right? When we think about that, and art making, whether that's paint or clay in the process, these things too need water. So water is showing up in all elements historically,
yeah,
our work, spiritually, symbolically, and marrying that with the data now that when we talk about water as an upstream and downstream, right? We know that about 21% of Black people are suffering from mental health, illnesses worldwide, and only 39% percent of those individuals are having difficulty, receiving care in that regard. And when it comes more specifically to Mississippi, we know that there are a lot of Mississippians who are uninsured. About 21.1% often talk about how they even don't have access to mental health and healthcare, access. We have these other social determinants of health and upstream factors when it comes to housing and access, transportation, food access that truly impacts the well-being of the whole person. And we talked about the shared similarity of data with South Carolina residents as well, echoing some of those same issues and concerns. And so with our work, there's a duality there. There's an upstream component of using our work to challenge the factors, basically the root causes of these sources in an advocacy way, an awareness way, and giving people the opportunity to truth tell and tell their stories on how they're being impacted. And then there's a downstream aspect that happens in regards to what does art do to the healing of the body, because we know that art participation shows increased levels of dopamine, serotonin, health and well-being, calming, stress reduction, depression reduction. Can you speak to that and how you've just seen some of these conditions shape that experience, and then how art has been a response and a tool to those conditions as well?
Absolutely. And I'll give you a recent experience that we just had. We have a elder in the community who just turned 80 years old, and he never had a birthday party. And we were talking to another elder, and when we heard her say that, we were like, you know what? We want to gift him a concert. And
Mm,
so we worked together for like a couple of weeks, and we finally got to the date of the concert. And because time is changing, when I went through sound check, right, sun was up. Um, as the concert began, it was like right at dusk. And so the setting just got very quiet. You could only hear nature. And so by the time the show ended, it was like really, really dark. But we also
mm,
had a lighting system up. And so once we got through and we're talking to some of the people in the community that were there, one of the ladies said, "You know what? This is exactly what I needed. I've had a really rough week, and you guys just really did something for me internally, that I really needed." And there was another elder that said, "You are," she called me a singing shaman.
mm,
And when when you hear stuff like this, it's hard for us to be outside of ourselves and recognize sometimes what other people see in us. But when the community is literally telling you, you are helping me heal, then another elder said, well, what are you going to do with that? Like, she literally asked me that question, because also our community just went through, we had a mass shooting here that actually went global, as far as the news, and which
mhm,
was a couple of weeks ago. And so she asked me, after experiencing this, what are you going to do with this power and this gift that you have? And not that we haven't already been doing the work, but
mhm,
it was like she brought it like right to the moment, um, to where you know you're doing something right, right? You know that you have been gifted with something that has the ability to help the community heal. So it's a matter of, okay, now I know I need to do more. So what kind of programming can I come up with? It's like, so now it's like we're thinking, how can we do more with what we have? Um and it just made it really powerful.
mhm.
And again, just letting us know we're right where we need to be, and in the work that
Absolutely.
we're supposed to be doing.
I want to sit there for a moment. I know that we can so quickly go to the challenges that we are faced with in this work, and it's very easy for us to look at the challenges that we are faced with. But I really want to sit with the empowerment, the authenticity, the vulnerability that you share in helping us visualize this 80-year-old receiving a birthday,
Yeah.
what that's doing for his nervous system, and so many other people being impacted by your gift, your talent, and really the science behind art that I often think is left out of the conversation. That there really is truly a shift that happens in the nervous system when we're able to calm ourselves and reduce high levels of cortisol, stress hormones, and when new memories are created when we talk about neuroplasticity and the need of that to be able to be creative and imagine and think about these solutions, right? Um, of recent as well, a similar experience happened as I've been starting to do work with the Mississippi Museum of Art, and we're working with traumatic brain injury survivors and their caregivers, along
Mm,
with cancer survivors as well. And we use clay um, yesterday to evoke this conversation with the body, right? The body of the ordinary person. And in this particular case, we were talking about the ordinary woman because it was a reflective response to Moses Sawyer's portrait of the three dancers. And so I won't get into the details, but the outcome of how I witness individuals use water to mold the clay, the tension that they released in their body, recognizing that they were using more than just their hands. How often do we forget how to be within ourselves and how art can bring us back to that here and the
yeah,
now, the moment, the understanding, and so many different moldings of bodies and different positions, different thought processes came out from the use of clay. And we know that clay, again, that reference to the Mississippi River and that southern, red clay and water. And so
yeah.
all of these analogies that are often among us as we walk and manifest the world, but how art makes us stop to really pay attention to the very things we have access to evoke our own health and well-being when we are faced with these challenges and conditions. So as we move into that, I know we could speak for days about the challenges we face as both
Yeah.
artists, as healers. But when it comes to a few challenges under the umbrellas of funding, policy, cultural mistrust. Do any challenges speak up to you of how you are in a constant fight and how are you overcoming some of those challenges?
You know, overcoming is minute by minute. Like literally, we're living in a space in where things are happening like in real time. And it's also I know the question is geared towards, the negative things that you are now dealing with. But I would challenge people to go into your community, go to your local chamber, go to your local grocery stores. And there are a lot of, especially when you build relationships with people on the ground, some
Hmm.
of these companies and organizations are willing to give grants. Some of them are willing to, because you are a nonprofit that's in the community, some of them are willing to like be on the level and hands on with funding that you might be needing or a project that, especially a project that is going to affect the direct community. So I would just say that we really focus on where you are and who you can connect with because we all have those challenges that we're going through. Just going to the grocery store, going in the grocery store, I deal with um just craziness, sometimes and I don't want to focus on those things. I would rather us really think about the things that we can do to help ourselves and the things that we can do to help our community.
Mm. I appreciate um, that way of thinking, that pathway. It helps people like me who can tend to be overcome with the challenges, right? Aspect of things. And I do think there is a space and a need for both to exist because we do
Yeah.
have to have people on the ground bringing these things forward and holding people accountable, especially when we talk about funders work. I think one thing that I see is that there's still such a large separation between art and health, right, especially in the South.
Yeah.
Um, and this idea to see them as partners, um, in conversation and in community with one another, and not as two separate entities. Where there's art, there is health, and where there's health, there's art, and we see that in beautifying communities and using art
Yep.
to increase engagement. So that's a challenge that I currently see when it comes to the funding language. Sometimes they make you choose between the two, or they simply don't have room to welcome both. And when it comes to policy,
Yeah.
there's still limited recognition of the role of art-based healing, right? And art-based healing as a science and as something as of value. And I think that's where my energy has been lying lately when seeing other leading institutions like John Hopkins University or One Nation, One Project, or Art Pharmacy. They've taken art and really turned it into um, medicine, where
Yeah.
individuals go to the doctor and they get prescribed art, like weekly art activities that are covered by insurance. And that's very popular in the Northeast. And I'm looking for the day that that can be the
Mm.
language and the roadmap of the South when we talk about health
Yeah.
access and healing. And then there's this institutional resistance sometimes as well. Um, Again, going back to value, we are artists and we know that life is something different as in getting our art and moving our art through communities, but really it taking a credible and value sense of the health
Yeah.
aspect. Art is science. Art is a valuable practice, and there are many physicians and researchers driving and supporting this work. Tasha Golden being one, driving this work. And so, if we can overcome these challenges met with this positive outlook that you have, this very grassroots outward of
Yeah.
relationship building, I truly think we can change the landscape of health and well-being.
We are changing it.
Yes, we are.
You and I are literally changing it.
We are. We are. We are. Thank you
Right?
for that reframe.
And yes, and we can echo that because we personally know lots of other artists and who are healers and out there doing the work. So the echo
Absolutely.
might not be seen by the masses, but I can guarantee you it's under the ground and the echo is there and it's shaking people up and they don't even realize it. Just
Mm-hmm.
like people are being healed in these spaces and they don't realize it, when they're taking that good energy out, they're giving that energy to somebody else. So our
Right.
work is the ripple effect is huge.
Such a great conversation. Before we start to conclude the ending, is there anything that you absolutely feel compelled to share from before, specific to South Carolina, the conditions, any statistics that you think are important for us to know, or anything in general? And if not, then we'll just move on to some lessons and some takeaways.
I will share because you know I love telling stories. Because you mentioned I can't think of the word that you used, but it was in in reference to medical um something and memory. I know you mentioned water and memory, but it was something else about
Hmm.
health. And I will use
Okay.
the experience of a personal experience of me and my husband because my husband has had 3 strokes. And it was the 3rd stroke where the music like really helped him to heal through the process. And what we found out was that he was he is what you call a synesthete. And he had been dealing with not dealing with because it's really like a magical power. right? It's when he creates music, he also sees colors
Mhm.
and sometimes also seeing energy around people. And so for most of his life, he just kind of lived through it, right? He never shared it with anybody. But
Mm.
we were watching a Quincy Jones documentary. And Quincy Jones talked about being a synesthete. And this was also during the healing part of his third stroke. And so it was like a light bulb went off for him when he saw this in somebody else. And
Mhm.
just in creating the music, but also understanding what you're physically going through and giving it a name, seeing a person go through this and literally the third stroke was more mental than anything else because he had already gone through the physical part of the left side partial paralysis. And so this dealing with the mental aspect of what it does to you neurologically.
Mhm.
But when he was in creating music and also outside in nature, this was the thing that this is when I was able to connect with him because there was a point where he was trying to explain things, but like it wasn't connecting with me. It wasn't connecting within himself. And but the music was always there, right? In nature and going to the water. But
Mhm.
when a person can um allow the music to really help you through the process, because we'd already, as artists, we knew what it could do. But this is when we really had to lean heavily into the process of us creating, the process of us talking about it, the process of me just really listening to him and not um commenting, not trying to give him advice, but just literally listening as he would talk about the process of music and what he was going through as a synesthete. And I feel like that can help somebody, right? Because there are people going through things and they don't have a word for it. They don't know what it is, but they know that they're feeling something and they may not have the support system around them to help them navigate it. But the fact that the artistry in that
Mhm.
is what um really brought us together and also helped him out of that neurological part that he was, really, and it still does to this
Mhm.
day. And the last stroke was 2018. So he's literally like still using it to help him neurologically and then also physically.
Mhm.
And I think you probably know the language for that. Yeah, I mean, you could speak to it better from that perspective. But I really wanted to share that. Yeah.
One, thank you for sharing that too. I think vulnerability will shift a room and will reach your heart and call in an ear anytime. And I think you're in the same ballpark, right? What we're talking about is neuroscience, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the ability for art to connect the brainstem with the prefrontal lobe and activate all of the lobes. When we talk about memory, being able to find language and how a stroke can disrupt those pathways. But art kind of brings it back to be synchronized together again. Um, that gives me and neuroplasticity of helping rewire and create
Yeah.
new memories and shooting those fires. Also, I don't think we talk about this enough, but the reduction of cortisol stress hormones, right? Because oftentimes when we see high increase of cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, high cholesterol, stroke, heart attacks, in the Black community specifically have been strongly related to high cortisol stress levels. Those high cortisol stress levels have also been linked to the byproducts and the debris of racism and racial trauma in this country. And we know that we are in two states that are very much hold histories, right, of the
Yeah.
Mississippi River, holding histories of all of that. And so, thinking about this water again and this subconsciousness of what lingers in the undercurrent of our subconscious, and oftentimes when we don't see the invisibility of that and only seeing, the surface, art and music brings out that invisibility.
Yeah.
Um, Even in my personal experience also, and in listening to my clients, all the people that I've worked with, so much of this stress has been directly related to or exacerbated by health inequities, racial inequities, of why our communities are faced with these conditions. And it truly impacts the rewiring of the brain because it sends you into a space of survivance and not one of thriving.
Yeah.
And when your nervous system is constantly having to survive and survive, there's a weathering that happens. And we there are consequences, because of that. And so thinking of art, again, as an advocacy to reclaim our health,
Yeah.
but also to create pathways for just common conversations and communication about this. Um, so that we can continue to both uplift and expel some of this debris, that Dr. Gail Christopher also referenced in her
Yeah.
analogy of water, in that space. And so, um, I just appreciate your vulnerability because it was my own depression that led me to art that I still struggle to this day with, like, naming and voicing. It's a very sensitive space,
Yeah.
and to be able to be obedient and respond to that has opened up so many doors for families, friends, colleagues to be able to tap into self and actually ask, am I okay? And it was that obedience that also led to wellness on wheels and art therapy in these spaces so that other people can experience and have opportunities to, speak to these things and expel these things as well. um I think this conversation has been so enriching, and you know us, when we get together we can go on and on and on. But to conclude, I'll kick us off with some major lessons that resonate with me, and you feel free to jump in with your own as well. Something that comes up for me is that art is data. You know, I don't think there's a question, and art always will be data. Um, Also, with that, healing happens when people are able to be seen and not studied, right? I know that, we are in this very interesting conversation with researchers and how to be more community centered and how to involve communities in research. But people want to be seen. People are tired of being studied. Also, art as a prevention has to be the core of the work, focusing on the upstream root causes. I think oftentimes we want a downstream and kind of band-aid, but we really need to use art to bring a focus to what are the upstream root causes of why people are even having to live this way and respond in such a survival way to these conditions. Um, and lastly, I would kind of say that culture is not decoration, right?
Mm.
I think oftentimes, in spaces like Mississippi and South Carolina, there's a lot of music, a lot of food, a lot of fashion, a lot of languages, a lot of culture there. And oftentimes that gets chunked up as something to be looked upon, or to
Yeah.
be seen, but it's not decoration. It truly is the infrastructure of care, what care has been for our ancestors, what care has been for our communities, and what care has been for us. And if you would like to lend us any lasting messages as well before we close out with a beautiful song from you, or a few lyrics from you, if you will, um, do you care to share any takeaways or major lessons?
I think you covered um for both of us in because you mentioned the culture and how important it is, and we are not clothing that they can wear. I think you covered that, but I do have a quote that I came up with that I feel, and you actually hit on it a little bit, but I'm gonna say some of it in Gullah. And the quote is, "We're all finding and connecting with ourselves, but we should big up on ourselves for staying true to we call it." And that is exactly what we are doing. We're living it, and we're taking ownership of it
Could you repeat that
by
for us one more time? I just want to make sure the
yes.
audience hears you very clearly.
We're all finding and connecting with ourselves, but we should big up on ourselves for staying true to we calling. Period.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that being said, would you feel so comfortable to gift us with,
Mm.
a couple of lyrics of just closing a hopeful message of what this conversation has been and what this work will continue to be?
Because we have been talking about water,
Oh,
um,
yes.
right? Let's see. Got up this morning a day clean, said a prayer before my feet hit the floor. Grateful for another day, the blessings waiting at my door. Give thanks that I was able to wake up as I pour coffee in my favorite cup. I'm going down to the well where the water never runs dry. It's a place where we all go to shed our tears for all the days gone by. And it's called a well.
Wow. That was perfect. I'm glad you went with that one. Where the well never runs dry.
Yeah,
Sister, it has been a pleasure to both see
it
you
has.
again and be in communication and conversation with each other again. I think this has both motivated us to do some work in some different directions as well to keep these conversations
Absolutely.
going. And with that being said, we're out.
We're out.
For additional information, visit the NCHE website, nationalcollaborative.org.